Why do I feel empty, even when everything seems okay? You smile, you say you're fine, you go through your day doing what's expected. But deep down, something feels off, like a part of you is missing, or hiding, or quietly screaming beneath the surface. Maybe you've tried to be good, kind, calm, patient. You've done everything right, but there's still a side of you that wants to scream, control, run, or completely disappear. And no matter how hard you try to silence it, that part won't go away. What if everything you've been trying to push down, everything you hate about yourself, is actually trying to help you? Carl Jung called it the shadow, the backpack you've carried since childhood, filled with all the parts of you that others said weren't welcome. Anger, jealousy, shame, wildness, creativity, power. All the pieces you were told to hide in order to be loved. There's a part of you you've disowned, not because it's evil, but because someone once taught you it was unacceptable. But what if the part of you that keeps sabotaging your dreams isn't your enemy, but your oldest wound trying to speak? What if your shadow isn't something to fear, but the very part of you holding the key to who you're meant to become? Maybe the reason you feel so lost is because you've been searching for more light, when what you really need is to finally turn toward the dark. Because in the mess, there is meaning. In the shadow, there is purpose. You are not broken. You are becoming. And your shadow is trying to show you the way. But before you can truly embrace it, you have to recognize the silence it's been hiding inside. You ever find yourself wondering, why do I feel like something's missing? Even when life looks okay on the outside, job, relationships, daily routine. Deep inside, there's a quiet ache, a sense of drifting, a feeling of being disconnected from something. You just don't know what. Most people carry this hidden weight. They try to fix it by staying busy, achieving more, or pretending everything is fine. But the emptiness doesn't go away. It grows louder in quiet moments, especially when you're alone with your thoughts. This feeling doesn't mean you're broken. It means there's a part of you that's been buried for a long time. A part you may have pushed away so early, you forgot it ever existed. Carl Jung called this part the shadow, the collection of thoughts, emotions, traits, and desires that we learn to hide because we're told they're bad, unacceptable, or not you. As a child, maybe you were punished for being too loud, too angry, too sensitive, or too curious. Maybe you learned that showing certain emotions would cost you love, safety, or approval, so you buried them. You became what others wanted you to be. Over time, you learned to play a role, the calm one, the smart one, the strong one. But behind that role lives the real you. And parts of that self never stop trying to be seen. That's why you feel lost. Because somewhere deep down, your inner world knows something's missing. You've cut off pieces of yourself just to be accepted. And now, those missing pieces are calling you back. You might notice it when you react more strongly than you expected. Sudden anger, jealousy, sadness. You might see it in patterns, sabotaging relationships, procrastinating on goals, running from opportunities. Those aren't random. They're signals from the shadow, not to destroy you, but to wake you up. Because here's what no one tells you. The parts of you that you've labeled wrong or bad may actually hold the deepest clues about who you really are and what you're here to do. Jung believed that the path to wholeness isn't about being good all the time. It's about becoming real, integrating all the parts of yourself, even the dark ones. So if you feel confused, stuck, or lost, that doesn't mean you failed. It might just mean you're finally ready to meet the self you've been running from and begin the journey back to wholeness. Because healing doesn't always start with the light. Sometimes it begins when you sit in the dark long enough to hear what your shadow has been trying to say. But what exactly is this shadow? And why has it been calling to you? When people hear the word shadow, they often think of something evil, something to be feared, hidden, or destroyed. But that's not what Carl Jung meant at all. To Jung, the shadow wasn't the villain of your story. It was the part of you that got left behind. The shadow is made up of all the emotions, thoughts, desires, and impulses you were told were unacceptable. Maybe you were told, "Don't be selfish," so you buried your wants. Maybe someone said, "Stop crying, be strong," so you hid your sadness. Or maybe you were teased for being too sensitive, too loud, too proud, so you learned to shrink. All those moments left a mark, and instead of disappearing, those pieces went underground, into your shadow. The shadow isn't your darkness, it's your rejected self. The version of you that got the message, "You're not safe here." And the more you disown it, the more it starts to show up in your life in ways you can't control. It appears in your outbursts, your fears, your self-sabotage. It leaks into relationships, career choices, your confidence, and you don't even know why. Because here's the thing, the shadow doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It waits and whispers. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That's the power of the shadow. Not because it's destructive, but because it's unseen. And here's where most people misunderstand it. They think shadow work is about fighting your demons. But real shadow work is about hearing them. It's not about blaming your past or digging through pain endlessly. It's about making space for the parts of you that were never allowed to speak. Because when you ignore the shadow, you stay stuck. But when you face it, with compassion, not judgment, something incredible happens. You begin to reclaim your energy. You start noticing how much of your life was shaped by fear of being too much or not enough. And you begin the work of taking your power back. Think about it like this. Your shadow is not here to ruin your life. It's here to reveal it. It's trying to show you the places where you were taught to dim your light. It's pointing to the buried dreams, the swallowed anger, the hidden talents. And slowly, as you begin to make space for those parts, you stop feeling so empty. You stop feeling like something is missing, because you're finally allowing your whole self to show up. That's what Jung wanted us to understand. Not that we are perfect, but that we are whole, once we stop cutting ourselves into pieces. So, before you try to fix yourself, ask, what parts of me have I silenced to survive? And what would happen if I let them speak? Even a little. That's not darkness. That's healing. And that's where the journey truly begins. Because if you want to understand your shadow, you have to go back to where it all started. We're not born ashamed of ourselves. A child doesn't second-guess their laughter, their tears, their curiosity, or their anger. They just express. But over time, something begins to change. Not because we're bad, but because we start learning which parts of us are acceptable and which ones aren't. Maybe it started with a look, a harsh word, a teacher's tone, or a moment where you reached out for love and felt rejection instead. Those moments matter, because in that split second, you made a decision, often without knowing it. That part of me isn't safe. I need to hide it. And that's where the shadow begins. Jung believed the shadow forms in childhood, when we start to push away the pieces of ourselves that others disapprove of. Maybe you were too loud, too sensitive, too wild, too ambitious, too needy. So you learned to silence yourself, to keep the peace, to please others, to stay small, just to stay loved. You became who you were expected to be. Not because you're fake, but because you're human. And humans adapt to survive. But that adaptation has a cost. All those disowned parts don't just vanish. They become the shadow. And the shadow becomes the source of so much of our confusion, anxiety, anger, and shame. The irony? The very parts we've buried are often the most authentic parts of us. The passion you suppress becomes irritation. The grief you never expressed turns into numbness. The voice you silenced becomes inner chaos. And here's what's heartbreaking. Most people live their whole lives thinking they're broken, when really, they're just fragmented. You're not lacking. You're just living with pieces of yourself locked away. And that's why you feel the emptiness. That's why you can't explain the outbursts, the self-doubt, the guilt. Because you're not just dealing with the present. You're carrying every version of yourself that you thought needed to disappear. And unless you turn inward, gently, honestly, that pain keeps playing out. In your relationships, in your career, in your self-worth. But once you see it, really see it, everything changes. Because now you realize you weren't wrong for being emotional. You were just never taught how to feel safely. You weren't bad for having needs. You just learned others wouldn't meet them. You weren't too much. You were just in environments that made you feel small. The shadow isn't here to punish you. It's here to protect the most tender parts of your soul. The ones that wanted to love, to express, to be free. And if you want to know who you really are, don't just look at your strengths. Look at what you've buried. Because what you've repressed is where your story lives. And when you begin to reclaim those pieces, you don't just feel more whole. You feel more you than you've ever felt before. But knowing your shadow exists is just the beginning. The real transformation begins when you stop hiding from it and start walking with it. So much of life is spent trying to fix ourselves. We chase productivity, discipline, success, not just to grow, but to escape the feeling that something's missing. We think, if I can just become better, calmer, more focused, more confident, then I'll find my purpose. But what if the path isn't about becoming better, but becoming whole? This is where Jung's philosophy becomes radical. He believed that the only way to become our full selves, the only way to truly feel alive and on purpose, is through integration. Integration means this. We stop running from the parts of ourselves we've judged. We turn around, we look them in the eye, and we say, I see you. I'm listening now. This isn't some abstract spiritual idea. It's practical, emotional, and deeply personal. Because everything we've disowned, our anger, our sadness, our impulsiveness, our fear, they all carry something essential. Anger might reveal your buried boundaries. Sadness might uncover your longing for connection. Impulsiveness might reflect your suppressed creativity. Fear might point toward the dream you've been too afraid to follow. Your shadow isn't just darkness. It holds your deepest truths. And the moment you stop labeling these parts as bad or wrong, something powerful happens. You stop fighting yourself. You start understanding yourself. And in that understanding, purpose starts to rise. Not as a job title, not as a 10-step plan, but as a sense of direction that comes from deep within. Integration is about reclaiming every piece of your story, even the messy, chaotic, painful ones, because those pieces are your teachers. They reveal your values. They awaken your empathy. They show you what matters most. Maybe you've always thought your purpose had to look big, world-changing, shiny, impressive. But often, purpose starts with something softer. Having the courage to be fully yourself in a world that taught you to hide. Offering compassion to others because you've sat with your own pain. Creating, expressing, and connecting in ways that feel true, not performative. It's not about becoming someone. It's about remembering who you've always been, beneath the fear, the roles, and the masks. And yes, integration can feel uncomfortable. It asks you to sit with the parts of yourself that are messy, complicated, even shameful. But it also brings the greatest reward: inner peace, authenticity, and a deep, unshakable sense of meaning. When you stop trying to fix yourself and start embracing every part of your being, you don't just feel better, you feel real. And in that realness, you find purpose. Not because you've arrived at some final destination, but because for the first time, you're walking forward with every part of you, finally united. And it's in that wholeness that everything begins to shift, not just in your mind, but in your heart. Imagine this. You no longer flinch at your own thoughts. You stop apologizing for your feelings. You speak your truth, not because it's easy, but because you no longer believe you're unworthy of being heard. That's the emotional shift that happens when you embrace your shadow. And no, it doesn't come instantly. But when it does, something inside begins to unclench. The anxiety you used to feel about being too much or not enough starts to fade because you've stopped splitting yourself in half. You realize the part of you that gets jealous, that's your desire speaking. The part of you that feels rage, that's your inner protector. Fed up with being ignored, the part of you that withdraws, that's the child in you who never felt safe. When you stop making these emotions wrong, they soften. They don't have to scream anymore. They finally feel seen. And when you're not at war with yourself, you find peace. 1. Self-compassion deepens. You no longer treat your past like a mistake that needs erasing. Instead, you hold it like a wound that needs tending. You stop judging yourself for coping the only way you knew how. You start offering yourself the understanding you always gave to others. 2. Relationships improve. When you accept your own shadow, you stop projecting it onto everyone else. You begin to see others clearly, not through the lens of fear or unmet needs. You become less reactive, more curious, less defensive, more honest. People around you feel it, and slowly, they soften too. 3. Confidence returns. Not the loud, forced kind, but the quiet kind that comes from being rooted in your truth. You don't have to pretend anymore. You're no longer afraid of being found out, because you've already found yourself. You show up differently in the world, not because you're fixed, but because you're whole. 4. Joy comes back. The joy that once felt distant, like something reserved for someone better, someone less broken, starts to return, not as fleeting highs, but as a steady presence. Because when you stop hiding your pain, you also stop suppressing your joy. You begin to feel alive in the little things. A quiet morning, a song that stirs something old in you, a conversation that goes deeper than small talk, and most of all, you begin to trust life again, because you no longer need it to be perfect. You no longer need yourself to be perfect. You just need to be present, and that's finally enough. This is the emotional reward of shadow work. It's not about becoming a new person. It's about returning to who you were before the world told you to be someone else. So when the audience asks, why go through this work? Why dig up what I've buried? The answer is simple. Because you deserve to feel whole. Because you deserve to rest. Because you deserve to be you, fully, freely, and without fear. And yet, even with all of that truth, there's often a pause, a hesitation. Maybe you've been listening to this and nodding along, but inside, something tightens. A whisper says, "This sounds powerful, but I'm not ready. What if I open a door I can't close?" You're not alone in that fear. In fact, it means you're exactly where you need to be. The fear of meeting your shadow is the first sign that it's calling you. Because the truth is, your shadow doesn't want to hurt you. It wants to be heard. It doesn't want to ruin your life. It wants to rejoin your life. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever had a memory or emotion you buried so deeply that just thinking about it made your stomach turn? That's not weakness. That's your brain's way of protecting you. But over time, that protection becomes a prison. And the shadow becomes the locked room you never enter. So it knocks, then it pounds. And if you still don't answer, it kicks the door open through dreams, anxiety, or self-sabotage. The parts of you you've hidden aren't trying to destroy you. They're trying to free you, But still, the fear is real. So how do we work with it? 1. Start with curiosity, not force shadow. Work isn't about diving headfirst into your deepest pain. It's about approaching it gently, like you would a scared animal. Ask, what part of me is trying to speak right now? Then listen, without judgment. 2. You don't have to face everything at once. Integration isn't a sprint. It's not even a marathon. It's a relationship between you and the self you left behind. Take one step, sit with one memory, name one emotion you've been avoiding. That's enough for now. 3. Fear doesn't mean you should stop. It means you're getting close to the truth. Real transformation always comes with trembling hands. But the shadow isn't as terrifying as you think. Often it's just your 8-year-old self, still waiting to be told, you're not bad, you were just hurting. 4. You're allowed to ask for help. You don't have to do this alone. Therapists, friends, mentors, even books or videos like this can hold the flashlight while you explore the dark. This isn't a journey of heroism. It's a journey of honesty. And honesty can feel vulnerable, but it never betrays you. So if you're scared, good. That means you care. That means you're aware. It also means you're standing at the edge of something sacred, because the shadow isn't there to punish you. It's there to reunite you with your power. And the truth is, you've already survived the worst of it. The rejection, the silence, the pain. You've carried it for years. Now, you're just being asked to set it down and finally look. So if you feel resistance, don't run. Ask it what it's trying to protect. Sit with it like an old friend who's been guarding your heart the best way it knew how. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to be willing. And that willingness, that's where healing begins. So, where do you go from here? You face the truth, that there's a part of you you've long ignored. Not because it was bad, but because someone once told you it wasn't welcome. Now you know better. Now, you know that the anger, the fear, the anxiety, the shame, they aren't problems to erase. They're messages. And maybe for the first time you're ready to listen. But how do you begin something so unfamiliar, so deeply personal? Start small. Start gently. Start where you are. Because shadow work isn't about diving into the darkness to find monsters. It's about slowly making room for the parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding. It's not a race to heal. It's an invitation to feel. Let's walk through a few simple ways to begin. 1. Pay attention to what triggers you. When someone says something that makes you tense up or overreact, pause. Ask yourself, what am I really responding to? Oftentimes, the reaction is older than the moment. It's your shadow speaking through the past. 2. Write to your emotions like they're people. Give your sadness a seat at the table. Let your anger speak. Ask your shame, what are you protecting me from? These emotions aren't random. They're survivors. Let them tell their story. 3. Identify the qualities in yourself you've always tried to hide. Too needy, too sensitive, too loud, too intense. Write them down, and then ask, who made me feel like this part of me wasn't okay? Reclaiming those pieces begins the moment you question who told you to bury them. 4. Stop trying to be good. Start trying to be honest. Being nice is often just being afraid of being rejected. But your shadow doesn't need your politeness. It needs your truth. Dare to be real. Even if it's messy. Especially if it's messy. 5. Make space to sit with yourself. No distractions. Just stillness. You don't need rituals or journals or a perfect plan. You just need a quiet moment to ask, what part of me feels unseen today? Then breathe and listen. You see, the journey of shadow work isn't linear. It's cyclical. You'll revisit the same wounds from deeper places. You'll feel lost and then found, and then lost again. But this time, you'll know that being lost doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're still becoming. The mess you've been hiding, that's where the meaning is. Because behind every panic, every numb moment, every restless night, is a version of you just trying to be heard. Your pain is proof that something mattered. Your fear shows you care. Your shadow reveals the parts of you that are still alive. And when you stop judging those parts, you begin to understand them. And when you understand them, you begin to trust them. And eventually, they begin to trust you back. This is what integration looks like. Not a perfect you, but a whole one. So if you're scared, that's okay. It just means you're standing at the threshold of something real. Don't run from it. Walk with it. Because your shadow isn't the end of your story. It's the part that was waiting for its turn to speak. If something in this stayed with you, even just one line, let that be enough. You don't have to change your life overnight. You just have to stop abandoning yourself. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not too much. You're not too far gone. You're not broken. You're human. You're becoming. And if today, you took even one small step toward your shadow, you've already begun your return home. If this journey resonated, there's more waiting for you. More stories, more healing, more truth. But for now, take a breath, hold yourself softly, and remember, you don't have to be perfect to be worthy. You just have to be honest enough to show up. And you just did.